We were always told 85% of businesses never sell. Um, and when you consider that every single business owner will one day exit their business, yeah, that's a fact of life. When you consider that and you think that 85% of those won't sell, that actually should start ringing alarm bells and thinking, well, why is it that they don't sell? And I think there are some businesses, a lot of businesses are just too small to ever become a viable option for someone. You have to be really creative and really flexible to be able to sell anything in that business and get anything out of it other than just switching off the lights. There is an element of competition where right now there are still less buyers than there are sellers. And I think that, when we're working with our clients, we're working with sellers to make them as attractive as possible. You want to make sure that your business is the one that stands out in that marketplace.
Today I'm speaking to Saul Cohen from London. It's not very often that I get to speak to people from Europe. The majority of my guests are based in the US, so I'm happy to have someone closer by. Hi, Saul.
Hi.
Before you jump in, Saul is a partner at a company called the ex-PwC, and he's in M&A consulting, especially for companies that want to take the alternate route to growth and want to grow via M&A. So this is what we're going to be talking about today with Saul. Hi, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure.
I was going to say it's quite nice actually to be on a European podcast for a change. Yeah, I tend to normally be on ones with the US, so it's an interesting spin. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The majority of people that go on podcasts are US based, and the podcasters also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy to be recording at a normal time, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. A nice normal slot.
Yeah. So we started chatting about the current economic climate and how companies are looking at investment ready or more stable companies right now, and they're avert to acquiring. Can we talk a little bit more about the economic climate and what you're seeing in terms of M&A?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, look, I've so my background is I started in working at PwC. So I started working at the large accounting firms, and then I moved into the SME world, so to work with small successful business owners basically, and owner managed businesses, and that space has been very different. I mean, for a number of reasons, but the biggest reason that it's different right now is that lots of really successful owner-managed businesses were started by baby boomers. And as with everything else that the baby boomers have touched, there was a massive boom when they were in that part of the economy, and now they're looking to exit that area of the economy. There is a big potential for wealth transfer. So we are seeing lots of baby boomers who run successful businesses and built successful businesses now looking to exit. And over the past sort of 5 years, I think that we've seen that lots of adaptation. There was sort of in COVID, there was a lots of availability of credit, and so lots of buyers were able to make those acquisitions. People needed to get a little bit more agile after COVID. Credit dried up a little bit, and people had to be a bit more creative around deal terms. But now something's really interesting is that I'm seeing lots of people who are interested in making an acquisition. I see lots of people who are selling businesses, but me and it's not just me actually. There are lots of the lawyers that we work with and other accountants in the space are also finding that for some reason the number of deals closing this summer, has been less than prior years. And I can speculate as to the reasons behind that, but I'm not entirely sure about why that is. And I think it's a little bit to do with the economic climates and it becoming a little bit harder to make a deal.
Hmm. Does it have to do with the global economic climate, or is there something specific to the UK, you think?
I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know enough about deals that are going on the European continent. Um, I know that there are deals actually going on in the US, and so it's leading me to think that it might be a UK thing. I think that buyers are a little bit more cautious than they have been previously.
Well, it's
Um,
not. Just to tell you that it's not, because I work with European companies and I have partners in the US, and they're saying that liquidity has dried out everywhere, and they also have no clue why there is such an aversion to risk investments at the moment, or to why is everybody holding to their money?
yeah. So, I mean, I have a theory around that, in
Yeah.
that I think that most of the liquidity historically in the past sort of 20 years has come from pension funds, right?
Hmm.
And I think that now we're at a point where most of the people who are investing in their pension funds are drawing down on their pensions. And I
Uh-huh.
think so, therefore, that the general investment strategy in the world, I think, is becoming a little bit less, a little bit more risk averse.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think there is a bit of a concern there. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know where things will fall, but I know that these deals will have to go on because it just might be that vendor finance becomes even more common.
Hmm. What do you, yeah, okay. And so how are the vendors then reacting? So the baby boomers exiting, are they willing to be more flexible with the terms, or do you see it as they're still inheriting their past thinking of, give me the cash? Yeah.
So I think it depends how long they've been looking to sell for. The immediate response of any baby boomer is, I have a business, it's making £200,000 a year or whatever it is. It's probably worth a million, 1.5 million, whatever number, their friend has told them. Um, and they think that that's a number that they will walk away with on the day that they sell that contract. I think that the more time that they spend researching actually what does an exit look like, the more they realize that actually they need to become a little bit more flexible on those terms. Um, yeah, for me, actually, we were always told 85% of businesses never sell.
Hmm.
Um, and when you consider that every single business owner will one day exit their business, yeah, that's a fact of life. When you consider that, and you think that 85% of those won't sell, that actually should start ringing alarm bells and thinking, well, why is it that they don't sell? And I think there are some businesses, a lot of businesses, are just too small to ever become a viable option for someone.
Hmm.
Um, and that you have to be really creative and really flexible to be able to sell anything in that business and get anything out of it other than just switching off the lights. Um, and some businesses, like the example that I gave you, if you can come up with a sensible valuation and be flexible on the terms, you are you will get an exit. You will, I'm sure, given enough time, you will find a buyer. But and this is what I mean when I say it's going to be, there is an element of competition where right now there are still less buyers than there are sellers. And I think that, when we're working with our clients, we're working with sellers to make them as attractive as possible. You want to make sure that your business is the one that stands out in that marketplace.
Hmm. And what is your role in the whole process of buying and selling there? How do you position yourself?
Well, look, we're accountants, and the way we love to work with our clients is we bring on a client, we look at their, overall position, we work out what they're trying to achieve over the next sort of 5 years and beyond, um, and we put in place a plan for them to achieve that in the most efficient way. And that will include preparing their business for exit, making sure that they know what they can do to improve their business. If they have enough time, it might include supporting them with making an acquisition or several. And then looking up, looking on beyond that. We do have some clients where we only work with them on the acquisition. So we either will work with them on when they're coming towards an exit or when they are coming towards making an acquisition, and we're sort of their go-to partner for that. But for us, the ideal is that we're working with, it's a personal thing for me in that I want to work with business owners and help them change their lives. And I think that for me is the biggest thing. And so I'd much prefer to be working with a small number over the lifetime of their journey rather than working with one or two 100 clients, but only working with them on a singular acquisition or a singular project.
Mm-hmm. So, Sal, when you say you're helping them acquire companies, are we talking on the seller side? So the baby boomer wants to sell, but in order to make his company more attractive for exit, he needs to acquire companies, or is that what you meant?
Well, look, I think that there are two types of people who buy business. The first is the one that you mentioned. And the second is a younger business owner looking to capitalize on the opportunity that is the baby boomers retiring. They buy maybe 3 to 7 of them, put them together and package it and sell it out at a higher multiple. When it comes to the baby boomers, I think that one of the most important things when you come to sell your business is have the ability to think and understand like an investor would. And I think that most people, when they run their businesses, they forget how special they are and how unique they are to have run a business for 20, 10, even, years, and it still be running. That already puts you in the top percentage of business owners. If it's provided you a really good life and provided for your lifestyle, that puts you in an even smaller percentage of business owners. And you are therefore very unique. And the funny thing is that I think it's the humility of successful business owners that they forget how unique they are, and then ignore, even if when they're making other investments, they're very comfortable in the investment mindset. But for some reason, when it comes to appraising their own business, they're not capable of putting that separation in and viewing the business as an investor would. And one of the best things that we do for that, we suggest several things for our clients to do, but the absolute best is for them to make an actual acquisition, go through the process, understand it from a buyer's point of view, actually sit on the other side of the table, and not only will it give them the knowledge of what it's like to make an acquisition, but it also makes their new business a much bigger and more attractive proposal for a buyer. So we do encourage it for that reason. Not everyone does it. It's a personal thing, but I think it is really important, even if you're not going to make an acquisition, to really take practical steps to look at your business as an investor would.
So that means that in order for them to exit, I mean, theoretically, under this strategy, they would need to acquire a business in order to become more attractive themselves.
Yeah, so I think, well, if nothing else, one of the things that makes a business less risky is increased revenue and increased EBITDA, right? The higher and that's why larger businesses will sell for higher multiples, is because they're less risky. And so if nothing else, if you don't create any other efficiencies, if you buy another competitor, and you will now occupy a larger proportion of the market, you are inherently a less risky operation. And less risky operations are more likely to sell and more likely to get a better valuation.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay, and so who are the typical buyers in this case? Because you mentioned there's lack of liquidity, so these would be then younger individuals wanting to buy, or who are the typical buyers of such?
So I think the most successful buyers of these sort of businesses, so owner managed businesses, the most successful buyers could be either a family office, so a small family office, that can work really well, or a strategic investor. So, potentially selling to um, a competitor or someone who has a complementary business, maybe one of your suppliers, someone like that. That works really well because they know the market, they understand the business, and it's probably going to slot in really well. Um, yeah, and those tend to be the type of buyers that we're looking at. If we're looking for an individual investor, um, then I think the most important thing is that we need to find someone who's got a good values fit, and we need to find someone who has the capability to actually run that business. And lots of individual buyers will have that capability, but I think yeah, the important thing is to make sure that the one that we find does have that, sort of gravitas and maturity to be able to run the business that you've built.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, how often does it happen that the seller rejects an offer because there's a misfit between the future owner and their vision? Is does it happen?
On the surface, never, but practically all the time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'll explain what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Um, on the surface, I think business owners will never say, or I've never heard a business owner say, um, I'm rejecting them because we don't have a values fit.
Hmm.
What I have heard them say is it just didn't feel right. I didn't think they were the right person to manage the business, or they've got further down the line and then you say there was a breakdown in trust, or you know, I just wasn't feeling it. They get cold feet. There's a lot of emotions that go through actually with buying a business. Um,
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like I'm a therapist more than
Yeah, yeah.
more than an
Yeah.
accountant.
Yeah, because the business becomes like your family. It's so ingrained in your life as a part of
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think people underestimate how much how emotional it's going to be to sell a business,
Yeah.
um, and what that will look like afterwards. Um, but yeah, I mean, and so I think that when those emotions come out, if there's a real values mismatch, it normally will present itself before the deal completes. Occasionally they do go through, but those acquisitions tend to be the less successful ones because there's a conflict with the business. You're coming in with a completely new set of values. The business has been tailored to one set of values that they hold dear. You've now come in with a completely new set of values that are maybe in conflict. That's going to put you at odds with management and at odds with the rest of the team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think actually it people should be more conscious when they're looking at a buyer. And actually some of the really good business, sell side consultants that we work with, they they are firstly about, is this an emotional values fit?
Hmm.
Does this buyer gel with the seller that we are looking to sell, that's
Hmm.
looking to sell the business. And then it's about, okay, well, how can we structure the deal and how can they raise the money, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. In the US, there's been a huge growth in the searcher model. I don't know. I know there are a few searchers in Germany, but I'm not quite sure what the situation is in the UK. Are there a lot of searchers, like people that are acquiring companies on behalf of a larger fund and taking a big chunk after earn out, like 2 years of earn out or something like that? Is this model
No, there
common?
is there
No.
is there is a real growth, actually. There has been a real growth in, I suppose, buy side brokers
Hmm.
who represent buyers rather than sellers. Um, but we are yet to see that model, actually. I don't think we're that far off. Um, I have I've had conversations with people who are looking to set something up. I've just never seen anyone complete it and get that signed off. I think that if someone were to do it, they would be tremendously successful because I think the biggest constraint in the SME acquisition space is, as we said right at the beginning, liquidity. And if someone came in with sort of the backing of a fund, even if it's sort of a $10 million war chest or whatever, and came in and started buying up the SME world, I think they'd be able to move much quicker because they've got the access to that capital. They don't have to wait for, loans, etc., and would do
Mm.
really well. But we haven't yet seen any funds with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen the growth of these models in the German-speaking world, so Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and it's coming out of the US, so there it's clearly proliferating. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we've had conversations with people who are in the US. I actually flew out to the US to meet one of these fund managers who is looking to work out with a UK company actually in sort of April of last year. So I think it's coming. I don't think it's landed yet.
Yeah. Hmm. So what are the solutions now for people that are looking to buy and there's the lack of liquidity? Do you see the um, seller-sponsored model being more accepted or not yet?
I think it depends on the seller's personal situation. Generally, actually, that's what we see. Um, I think if a seller has been sort of savvy in their business life and they're sitting on assets and they're not going to be reliant on this business to buy them, you know, a property portfolio or a share portfolio so that they can live their retirement, then they're going to be much more amenable to terms because essentially this is a bonus to them. The exit is going to be a bonus to them. It's just going to add their family's wealth, and they're happy. If they would prefer a valuation over terms. I think when you've got business owners they haven't necessarily built up their own assets, or they haven't built up enough assets to be able to have the lifestyle that they've become accustomed to. I think in that case, business owners tend to dig their heels in a lot more about getting cash up front and are willing to sacrifice in many cases, they're willing to sacrifice the valuation in order to have more of that money up front. I think there's a tussle between the two. But the business owners, generally, if you've got flexibility, you will take valuation, and if you don't have the flexibility, you want the cash up front.
Hmm. I mean, I understand that the market is big and now lots of baby boomers are exiting. But what percentage of them are really at this exact situation where they don't have heirs and they are at or heirs that want to take over the business, I mean, and that are at a position where they can sponsor the buyer and so fit this picture? Is this like a sizable chunk of the market?
Empirically, I'm not sure. I know that in the UK, most of them have come to the point where they're at retirement age, right? So in the UK, I think it's something like 250,000. I think it works out as 25% or just under 25% of UK businesses are owned by someone over the age of 60.
Okay.
So that it's a large chunk of UK businesses. If that 200,000 figure I quoted was right, it sounds actually probably around the number that it should be. That's quite a significant number.
It is. Mhm.
Um, Now, are all of them going to be in the position to be able to accept terms or not? I don't know, but I know that all of them will exit that business at some point in the next 30 years because
Yeah,
either
or
they're
you could
going
stay in
to.
the family theoretically.
I think that model is becoming less common.
Hmm.
In fact, actually, we recently worked with someone who they um, they wanted to give their business to their son, son works in the business as sort of, I think, the managing director or the COO, sorry. Um, and so that they wanted to give the business over to the son. Son's doing a really good job. Um, so gave the business over to the son. 6 months later, son was like, I don't want this. This is outrageous. I don't want to have it back. Gave the business back to his dad. And so we moved it. Well, we worked with them to find an exit. They exited that business to a third party who's kept the son involved as an employee. Um, and I think we the generation below the boomers, um, I think their children often have looked at how hard their parents have worked to get to the financial stability that they've got to. And not in all cases, not every time, but I think it's quite common that they look at that and say, I would prefer to have more time available with my family than to work as hard as my parents worked to get to where we want to get to where we are today. And that is exactly in the case of the client that I just mentioned. The son turned around to his dad and was like, I've got too much fun. I've got commitments outside of work that are too big that I just don't need this. I'm not in a position. I'm quite happy to take, £120,000 a year, a little bit of a bonus. That's more than enough for me. I don't need masses and millions and whatever, sell the business to someone else. I'm happy to work for them. And he's going to be a massively valuable asset to that business. But, is what it is. So I think that, and I have seen that story play out, or some version of that story play out in many cases. I'm sure there will be business owners who do pass it on to their kids. But I just think that model is becoming less common.
Oh, in my observation, there's convergence of various influencing aspects on these businesses. First of all, the whole COVID thing that happened. Secondly, now a whole transformation because of AI. So these businesses are anyhow seeing declining results right now, and at the same time, they're willing to sell more eagerly than before. So they're at a very precarious situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's quite interesting because as you say, I think that in the last sort of, let's say, 7, 8 years, we've had more economic turbulence than we've had. Definitely, certainly in the last 20 years, we've had incredible economic turbulence. If you think about it, 2000, the 2008 crash. Since then, it's, the boom post 2008 did not feel like the boom of, the early 2000s or the 90s. So yeah, so I think that for a lot of business owners who've been through all of this, they went through COVID and sort of said, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, true. So who is the typical person or business owner that is contacting the expert eye, your company where you're a partner at?
So I suppose the typical business owner that we work with is someone who is a successful business owner. They've built a business of substance, and either they are looking for an exit or they are looking to scale their business and then eventually, retire in a better position than they would without it. So I set the firm up because actually my dad was going through an acquisition. He was selling his own business. Um, and I just remember thinking he was just he just didn't have access to the advice. And if he would have had access to that advice, he could have made different decisions and planned, and his planning in the 10 years prior might have been different. And I think that's really important for people to know. So that's why I set the firm up. And I think
That's
that
right, because if you're a large company, you go to PwC, but if you're a small one, a small business owner, what do you do?
exactly. And I thought it was such a shame. So I set that firm up for those type of people. So those are the people we work with. The ones who they've built something of substance and they want to take it to the next level or they want to exit it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sal. Anything else you would like to add? How can people reach you?
Yeah, well, I think probably the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I'm always giving tips and hints and tips on there. And occasionally we'll run stuff. So yeah, always stick out on there. And I suppose if there's anyone in your community who wanted to have a valuation, we'd do that absolutely free for anyone in your community. I would do that completely free of charge.
Fantastic. How should they contact you for this offer?
I'll give you a note and you can
Okay.
drop it in.
That I can put it. Okay, a link
Yeah.
that I can put below. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sal. It was a pleasure. Very interesting talk. Thanks for exchanging.
It was great. Thank you so much for having me on.